Well, hi, everyone. We are live streaming today to our Life After Diets community Facebook group. So we might have some questions pop in. And actually, the topic of this week's episode is a member question. It is a member suggested topic. Shall I read it?
Why not?
Well, the reason I wouldn't is because it's not on my screen. So let me pull it up and here we go. I have it now. I was trying to kill time. All right. So the question is, the episode, by the way, is about mental hunger. So when mental hunger goes in conflict with physical hunger, that's the suggestion. Sometimes my body doesn't feel hunger, but my mind, because of decades of mental restrictions, says, I want that food. I deserve it. And there is a conflict. Which part to listen to? How can I calm the mental hunger? It's very angry. It's full of anger. It just says, I want. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine.
I could see in the little smile on your face, Stephanie, I feel like this one is relatable for you, no?
The word I was going to say, had you not spoken just then, was relatable.
I could, just the expression on your face, I could feel you connecting to those words because my instinct is probably you had a bit more mental hunger than I did.
Yes.
In recovery. Off you go.
I had so much mental hunger that it took me a long time to understand, number one, what it was, and also number two, like to create an entirely new relationship with it. And I have created a post around this topic because I think that there's different ways of talking about mental hunger depending on where you are in this process. But mental hunger is, I think we tend to think about it, and I used to think about it as not real hunger. Like somehow it's some kind of invalidated hunger. Like it's hunger that's present but shouldn't be, or it's gluttony, or it's the desire for too much. It's not really necessary. And in my experience, if I had continued with that thought process, I never would have recovered. My mental hunger was as real as my physical hunger, but it was, instead of being related to my stomach, it was related to my psychology. So mental hunger is the part of us that is psychologically not safe, in the same way that hunger is the part of our body that's saying, physically, I need food to be safe. Like I need food to continue. Like I need it. And mental hunger is the same thing in the mind, especially where restriction has been present. And again, there's going to be caveats and there's different ways of looking at mental hunger. I don't think it's a monolith. I think there's different reasons it shows up. But one of those reasons is because of scarcity, and it is angry. It is the part of the psychology saying, I have been restricted, or I have felt like I was restricted and judged and held back for too long, and I'm sick of it, and I want more, even in the absence of acute hunger, because I need to ensure that there is enough. So it's the psychological enoughness. It's the antidote to scarcity from the psychological level. And it's a huge part of recovery, and the part that is the hardest to make peace with because it feels unwarranted and it feels like a character issue of, again, gluttony usually comes up as a word all the time, that we're quick to minimize and try to push down, and it only gets bigger then. But so my recovery process was actually more rooted in mental hunger, recovering through that, than actual physical hunger.
And I would just like to add, and I know that you would agree with this anyway, it's just to do with wording, but when you said it's in the mind, it's in the nervous system as well. Like it's in the body, that mental hunger. I think it can feel like we should be able to calm the mental hunger down just by telling ourselves it's just mental hunger. Our mind isn't strong enough, if this is something we're still struggling with, I think is where some people might be judging themselves when it comes to the mental hunger, or hunger that doesn't seem to be coming from an actual physical need for food in this very moment.
Well, remember one of your favorite metaphors of having to pee and being closer to the bathroom. It's this, right? It's this. You might have to go to the bathroom, and the difference between how much you have to go when you're down at the opposite end of the hall to when you get closer to the bathroom is the same. Your bladder didn't fill anymore in those couple seconds, but your mind and your system understand that something is imminent, and so it's the in the body, sort of rises, and the urge becomes stronger. And in the same way, like, this is not a controllable necessarily. And I believe there actually is, like, there are cases where mental hunger is more cognitive. It's kind of like a more rooted in thought and beliefs. But what we're talking about here, or the way I'm talking about it, at least at this point in the episode, is this: it's an urgency that is interpreted through the inclination towards food in the absence of feeling hungry in your stomach for it. So it can come through as, like, thinking about food and dreaming about food, and not being able to forget about the chips are calling to me kind of thing. But it's not so much thoughts exactly as like being pulled towards, and not being able to be pulled anywhere else. Like, you keep coming back to it.
I think as well it's important to consider that sometimes what people might be interpreting as mental hunger could actually be physical hunger. Our brains are monitoring our energy intake and expenditure constantly and over a long period of time as well, which is why you might diet or restrict for a couple of months, and then control goes and you're eating a lot of food and you are full up, but you are still hungry. But the body is going, no, I can't take in any more food. But physical hunger can still be there, even if your actual digestive tract is full
Yeah.
up with food. And that's something as well. You see that with people who are not eating enough during the day. And they'll say, I just lose control in the evening, and it's all emotional. It's all of this. And
Yes.
sometimes we look at what they're eating during the day. This isn't enough.
This is the difference between what I would call acute hunger and collective hunger. So acute hunger is like your stomach rumbling or whatever your signs of being hungry are when your stomach's actually empty. But collective hunger is hunger that has accumulated over time. And that could be over the day or over months or weeks or years, even, of your body being underfed. And that doesn't mean underweight, according to, charts and things. You can absolutely be of a quote unquote normal weight or overweight or whatever, and still have collective hunger based on your body's actual needs. And the gathering of that energy over time can present as like your body pointing you towards food, even when you've just had a big meal. So I call that, it's like a more collective sense of hunger. And this confuses people a lot, to your point, because the stomach's full. And so we have this mental thought that shouldn't be there, that we shouldn't still, I'm full. Why do this is evidence that I am just gluttonous, that I have a problem with food. I'm obsessed with food. I'm addicted to it. When really it's collecting so much energy and fear. The body's afraid of not getting enough food. So it rallies and it's like, go get it, go get it, go get it. Remembering that our biology and our physiology is very much still rooted in famine, scarcity, the experience of that. It's not caught up to the abundance of food we've got now and the availability of grocery stores all the time, 24 hours, a day. And it's still like, go get it, go get a lot of it, go get it now while you can, because we know that there's evidence that we miss out on that sometimes. So stock up.
Well, looking back at your recovery process, can you, from your perspective here and now, get an idea or an instinct of how much of your recovery there was that collective hunger from restricting, and then where that might have been the psychological hunger? How do you think about what that was for you in terms of how much of each of those was there?
They feel different to me. So collective hunger, nervous system hunger, feels more like extreme hunger, if that's a term that people are familiar with. Like, that's that bottomlessness feeling where you could keep eating and it feels like you just aren't getting full. Like you might feel, you can maybe identify fullness, but you could keep eating. Like, it's very much, you could just keep filling. It's that bottomlessness. And it's a bit urgent and it's very primal. That to me was more of that collective hunger. And I had to go through months of that. So I would say 3 to 6 months of time where that was happening. And I was having to honor that and continue to do that until that sort of started to abate. And then I think it was more psychological, where there would be more of this. It was almost, and that's what I mean, like this mental process of like, I don't know that I trusted myself to eat, so the psychology was like, go get some just in case you decide to diet tomorrow. But it wasn't coming from my body. It wasn't coming from that sense of like, I need food, I need it now, like this primally driven thing. It was more a psychological, I don't know how to, I'm just
It's hard,
reiterating
isn't
your
it? Yeah.
question. It's hard to, it feels different in the body to me. If one feels like it's coming from like my core, it's coming from a part of me that I'm not even in necessarily controlling. And the other part of me a psychological hunger though feels like there's some satiety in the body. There's a feeling of like groundedness in the body at that point. It's not this frenzy, but there's fear maybe in the brain. It's kind of like, it's like insurance policy food. Like, I don't trust you quite yet food. And I think I think it's a little slower and you can think about it versus the other, which is more like, I gotta. And to the question where this came from, and even in the way that it was written, there was something in that suggesting to me a little bit of that primalism, because it was that I wanted, I'm angry, like that temper tantrum kind of thing, like almost childlike, which tends to be more of that primal brain, right? Like it's the part of us that's like, like there's something in
Mhm.
that's saying, this isn't your conscious executive functioning. This is coming from something that you're maybe not even conscious of, that's saying, I need you to help me trust you. Like, I need to know we're okay.
There's a comment from Anne in the chat, and she's saying, it's impossible to find pleasure and satisfaction when I eat when my stomach's full. I could really relate to this one, particularly when I was struggling, because I had conditioned myself into the whole hunger fullness diet. And even when I first tried to do intuitive eating, I very much treated it like hunger fullness diet, eating slowly, stopping when hunger was abated. So that idea of feeling full, I didn't like it. It was too close to the feeling after a binge. There was some guilt and some stress about feeling full. And that switched for me, and I shared this once before, I think, on the podcast, when I had a moment where I'd been out and I'd had this hot, substantial breakfast and felt full, and had just a moment of clarity where I thought about how nice it is to feel
Mm-hmm.
full.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's something, maybe something, well, there was for me, so I don't want to assume that this is the case for Anne, that when I started enjoying that feeling of fullness, that I didn't feel like I needed to keep going and keep going beyond that, because it felt nice. Whereas before, there was a slight feeling of I'd failed or I'd blown it because I was full. So again, then last supper eating would come in. So like, oh, I've eaten a lot. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
make up for this tomorrow. I'm already feeling rubbish. So I'm just gonna get more in now because I'm gonna do better tomorrow. I'm gonna do better tomorrow. That was part of it. And I also think, again, I've probably spoken about this before as well, but the emotion of guilt is just incompatible with satisfaction. I would really struggle to feel guilty and truly satisfied and
Yeah.
after eating something when the guilt's around. So my first thought to Anne's comment is about your relationship with fullness.
100%. And I think that this kind of mental hunger is different than the kind I was referring to, where it's this collective hunger, the physiological nervous system hunger. It's still scarcity driven because of the guilt and the judgment, right? And so you're seeking pleasure and satisfaction, cannot access it because we are feeling guilty, which blocks the calm part of the nervous system, right? Which is the one that can experience pleasure and satisfaction and ease. Like, they're just different parts. So if one's on, the other's off. And so there might be this feeling of pleasure is scarce because guilt is blocking it. So I need to keep eating until I find it. So the mental hunger rises in the quest to find the satisfaction or the calm or the okayness, but it's continually getting blocked by the guilt. And this just keeps it's just keeps happening. And so it turns into a binge. And we blame ourselves for that. But essentially, like, It's not because you can't find pleasure and satisfaction. It's not because you're bottomless. It's not because you're greedy. It's because there's guilt. And that is not, it's inherently blocking access to feeling done. Because feeling done has everything to do with feeling satisfied.
Mhm.
And to Katrina's question, or comment actually, about is a bit different, but it's related. I often feel like I don't want the pleasure to end. If something is nice or fun, I don't want to stop. And again, where that mental hunger is seeking the continuation of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, which would be stopping, the mental hunger will keep speaking up for that. And again, it's scarcity related, right? It's the scarcity of, I don't have access to this enough. I don't have access to pleasure enough. Or in the absence of eating, I have to face my life, or the flatness of returning to, to something that is not a numbed out state, or a state of, that calm. And even actually, when we're talking about the satisfaction, like if we can find satisfaction in food, and you do reach that place of, like then you don't want it to stop. And you're like, I just want to stay here because I don't have access to this elsewhere very much. And there is still that scarcity that the brain is saying, okay, then stay here, then stay here, then stay here. Because your brain is just concerned with like helping you out right now, doing what, not future consequence or anything like that, but just like what feels good right now. Let's just stay in what feels good right now, because outside of this, we don't have enough, and so it's kind of hoarding it. What do we do with all of this though? Like, okay, fine. So this might be an explanation of what might be going on. Then what?
Well, this is how I reframed the pleasure thing for me, because I can relate to this, that idea of not wanting the experience to end. And that is, I noticed that actually when I really paid attention, the pleasure starts to have diminishing returns. There's the initial thing, especially if there's been conflict or scarcity around a particular food and you have it, and there's that excitement, right? The explosion of all kinds of pleasure going on in your brain about eating this delicious food. At some point, that pleasure becomes a diminishing return. And in those moments, that's when it can start to feel different. You're trying to chase something that's not quite there. You're still trying to get that initial hit, that initial high that maybe you had when you first started eating the food. Last week, I bought a packet of, you don't like them. I showed you them. They're one of my favorite biscuits, the chocolate digestives with caramel, because you don't
I
like
don't like
caramel.
caramel. I like them without.
And I bought them and I took them to my friend Carly's house, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't like caramel." I was like, "What is like? Who are these people who don't like
Sticky.
caramel?" I know, and sweet and delicious. So I bought this packet of these biscuits, and obviously I'd just come back from India where I hadn't had many sweet foods, and I hadn't had any of these because chocolate just doesn't last 2 minutes because of the temperature; it just goes yucky. So I hadn't had much by way of chocolate. So that first one I had was it just tasted incredible. Just tasted incredible. I was like, "Oh, that was nice. I'll have another one." And I had a second one. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that was really nice." And my brain was like, "Well, what about a third?" But I could already tell by the end of the second one that this is the point. Not always after 2 biscuits, sometimes 3, 4 more biscuits might be what I might want, and that might just feel absolutely okay and what I want to do in that moment. But in this moment, my brain was going, "You have a whole packet of these. And if you really want to maximize pleasure, have some a bit later or have some tomorrow." So often I'd had it where I'd started food and I had to finish it because I was chasing, chasing, chasing. And then there was none of the food left for me again. And I'd be trying not to get it again because I was reaffirming to myself that I couldn't be trusted. But once I really started this, I'm not even sure how it happened. It was a gradual thing, probably. This little psychological switch that was like, if I don't have this now, there's going to be some later and I can have this experience again.
Hmm.
And so it took me a week to eat these biscuits, which sometimes I still look at that and marvel and go like, "Wow,
I
Sarah,
know. I
you
do
have
that
to eat
too.
the whole packet in one go, even after a month of feeling deprived." It was a
Yeah.
real sense of, yeah, that felt really good. And I just enjoyed it so much more. So when I saw how it wasn't really that it was pleasure, it was some kind of compulsive chasing in the not feeling like I'm able to stop. I'm eating more now, now, now. And then normally physically not feeling great at all.
but dopamine is actually a chasing hormone. So
Mm.
you actually can derive pleasure in the chase. It's not just the reward, it's the chase, it's the promise. So sometimes you may be actually responding to that chase itself, that is inherently rewarding. But also, I have to just affirm that I still think that in times where I'm particularly stressed, tired, sick, when I don't have as much access to regulation in general, it's hard to even be able to think that clearly to say later because like later it will be better because there's a part of me that's like I don't want to be pulled away from this right now. Right now, this tastes so good that I don't want it to stop. And again, I'm getting like a child and that this for me is how I have compassion for it because there's something in this that's like that I just feel for where it's like everything's so hard sometimes. And when you're eating like a nice bowl of ice cream or granola or something that I would call like just like I just want to keep doing it. Like I don't want to stop. And I just feel like there's a part of us that I don't know. Sometimes I think about it like the part of us where we learned that good things don't last or we don't have access or it will be taken away or the other shoe will drop or this is my moment. This is my time and I don't have a lot of that. It can be very frustrating to feel like we'll stop and save it for later, because you're just like, I want it right now, and I just feel like I lean into that a lot. I lean into the parts of me that are childlike and that, because I think if I let myself lean into it, I'm much more likely to feel seen and validated. And then I'm like, okay, fine. It is an effort to stop. And I think sometimes with intuitive eating, we can have this expectation that it should just feel absolutely fine, which sometimes it does. And again, when I'm more regulated, it's not an issue and I can stop and save it for later. And that makes sense and it's good. But when I'm not regulated, when my nervous system's a little more angsty, then I feel mad about it. And then I need that to be seen and heard. And also there is some kind of intentionality about okay, the way I might talk to my kids. It's kind of like, I know that this is hard and stepping away from this is not what you want to do. And I know, and we'll have it later, but I know that right now it sucks. I need to do that to myself too sometimes because it does feel crappy. Like sometimes it's like, yeah, I would rather just sit here and eat like 5 bowls of ice cream because it just tastes so darn good. I just have a lot of sympathy for, for the feeling of that. And while it's still like, not necessarily in our best interest to sit and stuff ourselves until we're feeling ill, it can feel like we want to.
Yeah. This was not a quick thing. And I'm probably speaking about this from a further along in recovery perspective than perhaps a lot of people listening to this. So if this is difficult to do because that part that wants the food is just rising up and saying no, because it can feel like another restrictive thing or another rule, right? To go,
Mhm.
well, at the minute diminishing returns, that's the point that I have to stop. If I go beyond that, I've got it wrong or something like that. And there will absolutely be times when I will go beyond the diminishing returns. That will
Yeah.
happen in certain situations, but it's not coming from a place of I want to be unconscious or I'm trying to escape. It will normally just be because it tastes so good and I'm in a position where it's just not practicable to leave any for later. So I want to have it now.
Yeah. And the thing is, it changes. There's not one way you do it. I'm going to put it in my stories at some point. I have pictures of it. We had this ice cream in our house the other week. And one night I had a bowl and I was like, I could totally go for another bowl just because it's so good. I love it. It was mint chip, chocolate chip mint, actually, as I like to say it. And I could have had another bowl. And I was like, I'm not going to because I just chose not to because like, I don't know, because it was taste hunger based. And at that moment, like I was regulated enough to be like, yes, it would taste good, but I don't necessarily want another bowl. And then a couple nights later, I had a bowl and I had the same thought, like I could go for another bowl. And I was like, I have that bowl. And it's like it varies. And it probably has to do with my regulation or my hunger, actually, or my how much sweet I've had or not had, or my emotions. Like there's so many variables. And there's not one clear answer. It's not like, when this happens, this is what you do. This is how you respond. It's just kind of like, well, but I don't think we can respond to any of that if we're not somewhat calm. You know what I mean? Like, otherwise we're just reacting and it's impulsive. And I think that's what I used to have so much trouble with, is like the fact that I didn't ever feel like a choice. It just was something that would just happen to me rather than, and that's what mental hunger can feel like sometimes, especially when we're not used to listening to it. It will be like, I'm going to assert myself, like, and I'm just going to come on in and I'm going to bulldoze and like, I'm going to make, and then we feel out of control. I think the more we're talking to mental hunger and trying to understand it and be like, okay, like I can come down enough to listen to you and hear you out and even sympathize with you, like, and maybe, and honor you. That's when the mental hunger starts to, I think, become like, it calms down. It feels more seen. And then you can have conversations with it over time. So again, in the beginning, I had no conversation ability with it. It was just this thing that would take me over. Whereas now I can have conversation. Sometimes it's easier than others, but that's because mental hunger has been a concept I've actually thought about and worked on and changed my relationship with, rather than thinking of it as this evidence of my own weakness,
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? If you get in a fight with it, it will fight back. And this was what I know,
Mhm.
just with my appetite, whether it was physical, whether it was mental, emotional, whatever it was, if I tried to suppress or dominate, it would assert itself. It would be like,
Yeah.
you are not in charge here. I am.
Yeah.
Exactly that listening and acknowledgement and coming alongside of, and sometimes use the term gentle negotiation, but it's really, you can't do gentle negotiation if you've already decided beforehand what you think the outcome should be, because that's not
Yeah.
negotiation. Like, gentle negotiation is really listening to both sides of that. I think Anne makes an important point here as well, as she says, stopping eating means going on to do something else. I was like, oh, yeah.
No.
I even felt that a little bit today with my lunch. Had a little picnicky lunch and I was sitting outside in the garden eating it. And I knew that when I finished my lunch, I needed to make a couple of phone calls to a couple of hospitals about a medical thing, which I'd been procrastinating on for a week, actually. I was like, no, after lunch, I'll do that. And that lunch went so fast. And I remember when the food was gone, I was like, oh no, now I've
Yeah.
got to go make those phone calls.
I know.
And so food, if it can just be elongated, that pleasure, so that we don't have to go back to aspects of life that are just not desirable to us,
Yeah.
that I can relate to that.
That happens with work.
Yeah.
Not this work, but
No, no, this
but like,
works. We can't wait to get
yeah,
back to this work.
yeah, right. No, but like, having to finish a project, having to write, do a spread, whatever. It's like it's much nicer to be like, I want to just sit here and enjoy my food. This is my break. And I don't want to go back to this other thing. And that's why mental hunger shows up a lot. I think when people are working on something that they're generally trying to procrastinate, because but it is better. Like, I'll just name, like, it does feel better to eat than to do that thing, or at least to gather the momentum to do that thing. Oftentimes once we're inside of the thing, it's better. But that's fair. To me, that makes a lot of sense. And so you can understand why mental hunger might show up to be like, can we just stay here longer? I don't want to go do that thing yet. And again, you don't need to pretend that's not there, and to just sort of name like, yeah, I'm having trouble transitioning out of this space into that one because this one feels better than that one. Like, I don't want to go there. And I mean, again, I think it's helpful to say, like, that's what I'm dealing with. That's this problem. That's what this is. It's not really even about the food. It's about the fact that I don't want to do something different. I don't want to go do the next thing. But here I go. Like,
Man, gotta go and be an adult.
yeah.
Do grown up things. Ugh,
Yeah. And some days it's like we just don't want to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say talking to this mental hunger, what would that look like if you were going to break that down for a person who wants to go, okay, that makes
Mm.
sense to me. How do I talk to this feeling?
Well, it's just always hard for me to explain because I don't think that I actually think in words. I think in concepts, but I know some people think in words. So however you like to do it. Um, the feeling or the concept or the thought comes in of like, like, I just had lunch, but now I want a bowl of cereal. Now, caveat that if you have collective hunger, or if you're coming off of restriction and you're at the beginning of recovery, That's going to happen, and that needs to happen, and that's okay. That's supposed to happen. We need to have the cereal. Okay, so I'm assuming we're a little later, or like restrictions not part of it, or collective hunger is not part of it. At that point where it's more mental or psychological, then at that point you're kind of like, because I know what I would do is I'd be like, I didn't just think that. I didn't just think that. Like, like pretending like that didn't really happen, like, no, 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 no cereal. We're done with, and it's kind of like slowing that down to be like, okay, now I want this other thing, and I'm judging that, because this is where we turn off and be like, either we're like, I didn't just think that, or I'm just going to walk to the pantry and get it and pretend I'm not doing that, like it's just happening. I actually would like, it's not like I'm talking to myself, but it would actually be like, oh, okay, like I just had lunch and now I want cereal, but I'm full. And it, provided you are full, by the way. And maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, actually, no, I think I just want something sweet after the meal, and be like, okay, then that makes sense too. But let's say you're full and you're like, okay, now I want cereal. Be like, all right, something's happening here and I'm judging what's happening. What's going on? What is this? And there's so many different answers that could be there, but I'll pick one. Let's say it's I don't want lunch to end. Like I don't want to go back to my work afternoon. Then to say like, okay, that makes sense too. You can have a bowl of cereal and then go back to work. Like eventually we are going to have to go back to work. But again, logic is necessarily part of this. I think talking to it is saying, okay, do we need a little extra comfort? Like, do we need a little extra time? Do I want to go sit on the couch and do Wordle for a while? Or like, do I want to eat and do Wordle? Or like, how much of white knuckling is going to be involved in talking to this? Because sometimes that feels like very assertive, and it feels like, no, 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 we need to have this cereal. I'm really not having it any other way. And in that case, when that's the case for me and I feel like it's that big, I'm like, okay, I will slow down with you and I will pour the cereal. I will do this consciously. But if the guilt is still there, you're not doing it consciously, you're doing it quickly, it's still reactive, it's not helpful. I have to, if I'm going to do it, I need to be there, and I need to be like, okay, I don't love this, but I feel the urgency, and I understand that there's something larger than my desires, like my conscious desires going on. And so I need to be with that. And other times I might slow it down enough to just be like, okay, we can have that cereal for a snack later. Maybe it can be our break time or something like that. But I do need to get back to work. And I think this is just a way that I'm trying to prolong the inevitable. Does that make sense to me right now? This is such a farther along part of things. I don't even know if it's helpful to talk about it, because it really is so much farther. Like you have to have some kind of sense of calm to be able to do that. But maybe that's helpful to hear like where you're going towards. Because I certainly, I don't think I could have done that at another point. But sometimes it is in the slowing down with it. It's hearing it out and looking at it as if it was in the room with you and you weren't afraid of it. Like to me, it's that speaking back and forth and deciding like, okay, yes, or maybe later, or actually, this doesn't even make sense. I actually don't want this. I just don't want to go back to work. And even just that clarity is helpful, and now I can go back to work because I have to. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. For me, and again, I think I've spoken about this, but in a slightly different context. When that urge hit for something, it's always been something sweet for me, really. I would say to myself, okay, but you have to really enjoy it and savor it. Doesn't always have to look like some kind of complete mindfulness, but
yeah.
for me, I need to bring some presence into that, because the danger point was always going unconscious with food. Once I kind of flipped that switch and went unconscious, that's when, it would turn into more and more, and that would turn into a binge. And I could often tell just by presenting that to myself what was going on. Because sometimes it would be like, okay, yeah, all right, we're going to have that thing and we're just going to really enjoy eating it. And other times I'd feel a real resistance. Like, no, I want to watch something at the same time. I want to do something on my phone. And it would feel like that as well. Again, this is not demonizing using a screen while you're eating. We've done an episode on that and the potential advantages and ways it can help someone. But I could tell how it felt. It felt different. And in those situations, it would be a case of, okay, what's really going on? And that investigation part usually revealed something. Oh, yeah, of course. I have this sense of dread about this task I have to do this
Yeah.
afternoon. And I think you've spoken about this again, like in a slightly different context. The relief when I can find the reason for it. Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
then the urgency comes out of it. And I might still decide, oh, I'm going to have that thing while I start that task because actually I do want to eat something delicious while I do that. But I kind of go into it with my eyes open, very aware, and then it doesn't feel compulsive in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. That clarity for me is so helpful. And because it deflates the energy.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the battle is like battling this high energy thing it's a battle of wills and it's gonna win.
My body can only trust me to have these negotiations because I've come to develop that self trust that I am not going to fight with my desires for
Yep.
food. I can't get in a fight with them because
Yeah.
I'll just lose.
I
And that's
know.
very humbling. And that's okay.
Mhm.
Just well,
Yeah.
because it has to be, because
Yes.
that's just what experience teaches me. So that is a self trust that has to really be there for me in order for this to even be possible. If you're thinking, oh, there's no way I can negotiate with these feelings that I have. I don't know if it looks like you might be reading it anyway, but whether you've seen Helen's comment. I don't remember hearing the term collective hunger before. What is the meaning?
Uh,
I'm guessing she hasn't heard it before because I think you just made it up, Steph.
no, I didn't. I have a post
Oh,
on it. You know how I have that little, dictionary, those words I put up, like regulating?
yeah, but you still made it up.
I made it up, but
Oh,
not right
yeah,
now.
sorry, yeah,
I
not
made it
just in
up
this
before.
moment, but yeah, you wouldn't have heard it before, Helen, because it is
Oh, yeah. It's a Steph term.
TM's Stephanie Honestia.
Yeah. It's a collective hunger. Yeah. It's, hunger that has collected over time and is not necessarily like about the hunger you're feeling in and of that moment, but more like, for example, when I used to fast or even just like generally restrict, you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were great. And then by Thursday, Friday, I was like falling apart at the seams, binging like crazy, technically full, but all that hunger from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was still like waiting to be seen. It was kind of like, well, I'm still hungry. I have 3 days of catching up to do. So
Mhm.
yes, you're full now, but collectively we're hungry. In the question itself, like sometimes my body doesn't feel hunger, but my mind, because of decades of mental restriction, says I want that food. I deserve it. And you know what? It's not wrong. It's kind of like, yeah, after decades of mental restriction, you do. So
Yeah.
it's actually like accurate. I think we're so resistant to the idea that it makes sense.
I was
No.
quite invested in the idea that my binge eating didn't make sense. Other people's did. There was reasons for other people. Mine didn't make sense. I was
Yeah.
different. Everything about me and my presentation was different. So therefore, no one could help me. And although I really wanted someone to help me, I was also really invested in the idea that I was unhelpable.
Broken. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's me too, because because I was using the evidence that I tried everything and nothing had worked, but that's because what I tried was still under the belief umbrella of you must lose weight to be healed. Like that is the barometer,
Yes.
or moderate. Like, yeah, I just couldn't see. I think I couldn't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Well,
Have you
I think that's time.
think so? All right.
Well, thanks for coming and your questions. Well,
Okay.
ta ta, everybody.
Cheerio. Good work,
Cheerios.
Steph.